Welcome to Docket Decoder. If you enjoy our content, please help us out by hitting that like button or leaving your comments for us. And don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date with the latest court filings. As more information continues to come out about the Bryan Kohberger investigation, it feels like most of the attorneys who were covering this case early on have moved on. They've shifted to other cases and stopped weighing in with legal analysis about Bryan Kohberger or the investigation that led to him ultimately pleading guilty to avoid the death penalty. And in some ways, that makes sense. Legally, the case is closed. For many attorneys, there's simply nothing left to argue in court. But for those of us who have felt that something was wrong since the very beginning, that there were serious issues in how this case was handled, those feelings haven't gone away. If anything, they've only grown stronger as new information continues to come out. For every new record, every new document, it just seems to raise more questions than it answers. I want to encourage you to go and check out a video posted by Christy's Chaos. I've linked it in the description below. It's one of the clearest pieces of evidence I've seen suggesting that video evidence gathered by the Moscow Police Department and intended to be used by the prosecution was tampered with and altered to fit their narrative and timeline. For those of us who are still digging, still trying to get to the truth, this is the kind of material that keeps the conversation going and shows why this case is far from over in the court of public opinion. That's why I'm especially grateful for attorneys like Andrew Myers and Yoli Molina, who are still engaging in this case and weighing in as new information surfaces. I have a link to their channels as well, so go and check them out if you haven't already. In today's video, I want to highlight some clips from Andrea Burkhart's analysis of the July sentencing hearing. I've included a link to her full video below. Definitely go and watch it in its entirety, but I think her commentary, especially on some of Judge Hippler's remarks, is worth bringing to the forefront.
I've listened also to the surviving roommates, both in person and through their friends. And I can't think of how, frankly, courageous they have been despite the hell that they have faced by uncaring people who have come up with all kinds of crazy theories about two kids simply being kids.
Well, I'm going to pause it here because, of course, the judge's remarks are quite strong. And, you know, Judge Hippler is in many ways kind of, I consider him almost like iconic for a certain type of rural Western judge. Like, not uncommon, not uncommon at all in his attitudes. Probably a little smarter than most. He's very, very smart, very intelligent judge. Writes excellent rulings. Um, but quite no nonsense and quite well, he's good at judging, isn't he? He's good at judging. I didn't appreciate the inference that if you have theories in the case, it's because you are uncaring. I think it is the most caring thing in the world to want answers and to have questions. And if there are narratives that don't seem to be maybe supported by the evidence, that you would question those, even if they're coming from law enforcement, from police. He's very clearly got a strong law enforcement bias, has from day one. I think it's normal to have questions, and the case raises a lot of questions. And I think some people are satisfied with the answers that they've gotten from this process, but I think a lot of people are not. I'm not prepared to say they're wrong based on what's been presented, based on the evidence that's been presented. But I just don't like the broad brush that he's used here, because it has an aura of how dare you question the official narrative. Well, this is America. We're not only allowed to do that, that's kind of what we're about. We sort of stand for that. We don't just bow down to the government because the government says this is what happened. Okay, we're founded on recognizing that the government power can be intoxicating and corrupting. And it always has to be monitored and kept in check. So asking questions about what the government's done and the information that they've developed and the conclusions that they've drawn from it is one of the most American things that you can do. And if you care about justice and getting it right, I will say it again, say this many, many times. Skepticism is scientific. If you are not asking questions, you're not engaging in a truth-finding process.
As we sit here today, this case is ending, and we are now certain who committed these unspeakable acts of evil, but we don't know, and what we may never know is why. I share the desire expressed by others to understand the why, but upon reflection, it seems to me, and this is just my own opinion, that by continuing to focus on why, we continue to give Mr. Kohberger relevance. We give him agency and we give him power. The need to know what is inherently not understandable makes us dependent upon the defendant to provide us with a reason, and that gives him the spotlight, the attention, and the power he appears to crave.
Of course, certain things are unknowable, but other things are very knowable. For example, how? How did he do this? One person in the time frame that's been provided, without apparently knowing who any of these people are, being in the house before. You know, typically you would like know the layout of the house, you would know the habits of the people. It's part of like the prep that you would do if you're premeditating a crime. And it doesn't appear that he did that. The absolute savagery that was perpetrated, but not a scream, a few like muffled thumps, some descriptions from Dylan, you know, like noise, but nothing raising the alarm. He's not injured in the course of any of this. And again, you know, the lack of any kind of transfer DNA, there's no footprint, there's no trail, like nothing. How? That's knowable. Okay, that's very knowable. And I think it's unfair to suggest like, oh, that's just morbid, you know, morbid curiosity or something like that. No, people want to know, are we sure it's just him? You know, the attention and notoriety that he appears to want. I got to tell you, I don't know where he's getting that at all. I don't know where he's getting that at all. He hasn't said a word. He's said like barely 5 words in court. The minimum responses to you know, the questions that he gets. He hasn't been you know, a behavioral problem in any way. You want to see somebody who wants attention, go watch Daryl Brooks. Go watch that trial again. That's what that looks like. You see that a lot. That's not what we have here. But the whole notion of the scapegoat, you know, is this idea that you have this guilt as a community that you need to project onto a victim. And so you do that. You go and you just, you know, expiate all of this you know, anger and denial and rage and so forth on this person that deserves it, and now you don't have to feel it anymore. And so if you don't care about the answers to those questions, I mean, that's fine. You don't have to, but it's just very inconsistent to me to not care about the questions, but also have like real strong opinions about the answers to those questions. I would be shocked, for example, if Bryan Kohberger tried to like write a book or do an interview or anything like that. Oh yes, I know there's issues with like Idaho has a Slayer statute, um, basically a special statute that says if you try to make money off of your crime, you're not allowed to. It has to be paid to the AG. It goes to the victims, things like that. Now I have a million questions about how that gets enforced, but nevertheless, let's just say yes, I recognize that that's friction. But even absent any kind of benefit to him like that, uh, I'd be shocked if that happened. And I mean, I'll tell you why. Like, if the whole theory here, the whole theory of motive, which we don't know, and apparently we'll never know because nobody's going to ask, is he wanted to like commit the perfect crime or something like that. He just wanted to murder. He's a monster. He wanted to murder. He wanted to get away with it. He thinks he's better than everybody else. I mean, I don't think I'm too far off base, like characterizing a very common type of theory that I've seen out there. I wouldn't think he'd want attention given how badly he failed, right? Like, if your goal was to commit the perfect crime, you did not commit the perfect crime because you're here admitting you did it. No, you wouldn't give interviews and write books and something like that. You would fade away into obscurity. You would like try to be forgotten, wouldn't you? I don't know. So I just find that I find that comment by the judge, he appears to want attention. Uh it's just a little bit strange, because it seems so unfounded. It really seems so unfounded. Um yeah, maybe I'm wrong, time will tell.
Yet, even if I could force him to speak, which legally I cannot, how could anyone ever be assured that what he speaks is the truth? Do we really believe, after all of this, he's capable of speaking the truth or of giving up something of himself to help the very people whose lives he destroyed? Rather, I suspect the so-called reason would be dished out in enticing, self-serving, and aggrandizing, untruthful bits, leaving people wanting more information, more insight, and thus enhancing even further the power he seeks to hold. Even if we could get truthful insight into his why, I suspect it would not in any way quench one's thirst for actually understanding why in the first instance. Because there is no reason for these crimes that could approach anything resembling rationality. No conceivable reason could make any sense.
So again, if we're getting to like the psychology and the motive, it's not necessarily about making sense. Like, you don't necessarily expect what makes sense to somebody who would commit an act like this to make sense to people who, would never never even be able to imagine doing something like that. It's not about being rational. It's about understanding. It's about just having the information and do with it what you will. I just have a hard time seeing how knowledge is bad and how, okay, yeah, it's going to be self-serving. People are always self-serving, guys, like pretty much everything most of the time. Okay, there's some room for altruism. Sometimes we're altruistic, we're not self-serving. Uh but most of the time, yeah, we say things that we think put us in a good light. We put stuff on our social media that we think makes us, look good. We don't put our, first thing in the morning selfie on our Instagram. Like, yes, of course you're self-serving. You're also self-serving, judge. Like, that's just a thing. It's not like, it's just how humans are. We have egos.
And in the end, the more we struggle to seek explanation for the unexplainable, the more we try to extract a reason, the more power and control we give to him. In my view, the time has now come to end Mr. Kohberger's 15 minutes of fame. It's time that he be consigned to the ignominy and isolation of perpetual incarceration. I know there has been concern about him collaborating on books or movies or other media projects, and I truly hope that someone does not stoop to affording him this spotlight that he desires in the name of clicks, royalties, or profits. While criminal behavioralists should study him away from the spotlight in an attempt to prevent other would-be killers from acting on their worst impulses, there should be no need for that to spill over into the public eye. The great Idaho jurist Edward Lodge was known for trying to find something positive about every person he ever sentenced. And with over a half a century as a trial judge, that was a lot of people. This was often challenging, and I recall in one case he said that the best he could come up with was the defendant had good penmanship. Truth be told, I'm unable to come up with anything redeeming about Mr. Kohberger because his grotesque acts of evil have buried and hidden anything that might have been good or intrinsically human about him.
So that right there is, to me, writ large, this is why the family didn't speak. That's why his family didn't speak. This, I'm somebody that sits next to people like Bryan Kohberger in court, defends their rights, etc. To me, this is a remarkably unsophisticated view of the world and of humanity. Very incurious. I don't know who Bryan Kohberger is. I really don't. But I just have a hard time believing that anything and everything Bryan Kohberger has ever done in his entire life is bad and evil. So I think it's very unfortunate. It's very unsophisticated. I just don't know how else to put it. Just no nuance there. Very, very black and white. Bryan Kohberger has a black hat, therefore he has always had a black hat, always will have a black hat. And I think that that's unfortunate, because I think if you don't understand what brought people to this point, I don't think you have a good sense of what justice is and whether you're doing it. And you can't always do it. Again, you can't make up for crimes like this. You can't atone for them. But sometimes crimes like this are a much, much bigger tragedy than they appear on the surface, because of what led up to them being perpetrated in the first place. And it's just a shame to overlook that.
I remand the defendant to the custody of the Idaho State Board of Corrections for to be imprisoned in an appropriate facility and execution of the sentence, where he will remain until he dies. Though you have waived your right to appeal, you do have a right to file a notice of appeal. And any such appeal must be filed within 42 days of the date of the written judgment, which will be entered shortly hereafter. Though the appeal, you should be aware, may be deemed a violation of the plea agreement, and so I certainly suggest you discuss that with counsel if that is your desire. I ask the media and public present to allow the families to be escorted out first before they leave. Again, thank you to everyone for your stories today. I am strengthened by them, and I am encouraged by your humanity and strength, and God bless you. We're adjourned.
So that was that. Again, conclusion kind of foregone from a legal standpoint. Not particularly interesting. Yeah, I mean, he's got a right to appeal. You can waive it, kinda. Don't expect him to exercise it, however. I talked about that at the beginning of the live here, kind of what some of the extremely narrow pathways are to be able to appeal after a guilty plea where you've waived your right to appeal. So nothing obviously present there. I'm not anticipating it, but it is possible. The reason why it's important, though, is because that's going to set the timeline for what the judge has said is going to be his process for unsealing a lot of the documents that have been filed under seal in this case. So that was very much an issue, right? Part of the part of the problem with the lack of transparency, the reason for all of the theories, the reason for the questions, and so on and so forth. So much information being kept from the public, and the justification for that was always, well, we have to preserve Bryan's right to a fair trial. We can't taint the jury pool, can't have too much information out there, particularly evidence that may not ultimately be admissible at trial. Well, that justification is done now, okay, because the case is over and we're not having a trial. So that's no longer a justification. The only justification for continuing to keep things sealed are independent justifications that are typically based on privacy, all different kinds. You don't put people's social security numbers and their phone numbers and things like that out there. There's going to be other things like, again, the third party culprit, the alternative perpetrator, as they call it in Idaho, that motion and the evidence supporting that motion and so forth. Really not expecting a whole lot of that to be public. If it is, it's going to be very heavily redacted. And that is because the reason why there's limitation on alternative perpetrator evidence in court anyway is because that can have real impact on innocent people being named as a potential suspect in a court process. So what Judge Hippler had said is that he's going to go through he's going to let the time period for appeal elapse and then start the process of releasing the documents that have been sealed. It's going to be a process that he works in concert with the parties on. They go through and kind of identify what still needs to be kept private and what doesn't. And so there should be kind of a rolling process, I would imagine, of information being made public. Now, I am a little, be critical. Like, why not? I am a little critical of that just because, like, you should have anticipated that kind of all along. That the justification for having the stuff sealed was not going to be perpetual. It's always a temporary type of issue. But especially, he's taking this very hands-on approach with it that I just don't know why that's necessary. The parties are the ones who filed it under seal. They're the ones who know why they filed it under seal. It just seems to me that you would put the laboring oar on the parties to show like what should not be unsealed at this point in time and why. I don't know. I don't know why the judge would need to go through and kind of like take the lead on making those types of determinations. But hey, if it doesn't take almost a year and still not getting information like is happening in Delphi with the trial exhibits and stuff, that would be great. So it will be an improvement. 42 days, much better than almost a year with still nothing. So that's the conclusion of our sentencing hearing here.